there's some real strength and value in just growing slow. Just grow slow. Do what you can. It's not a race. You think about trees. Trees grow slow, but the mighty tree, deep roots, right?
Today, we are going to share the story of the Oya, the humble Oya. Actually, we're going to share the story of a man who took the Oya to another level, and that would be Josh McWilliams, the co-founder of GrowOya. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, pumped to be here.
Me too. I mean, we've known each other for quite a while now. We first connected, though, like maybe 3 years at least.
Yeah, I think there was this thing that came into the world that put everybody's plans just kind of sideways, that COVID thing. And so,
yeah, I heard about that. It was kind of rough. But yeah, I mean, like, look, when I first learned of the Oya, I think I had been familiar with the concept, but I would certainly say that you guys made it much more popular within like USA gardening culture.
Sure.
And so I thought maybe today we could first start talking about the Oya itself, and then share your story, because I always like talking about how people make businesses around the plant world as well, to provide inspiration for those who might want to go down an alternative path like myself or like yourself. So maybe we start with the Oya itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So this, at least for me and how I got connected, it was absolutely about solving problems. So I'm a chef by trade. Everything had been food up at that point. I was chefing up at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and sat on the sustainability council there, was learning a lot about our food systems and how not secure those food systems were. My daughters were really young at the time, and I remember having a bit of an epiphany out in the restaurant lounge one day. I was looking at my team of cooks that are working on the front line and all the service staff going around, and I was thinking, where's these people's food going to be coming from? How are we going to sustain an industry when so much food is being shifted in one direction, that big food angle. And so yeah, I was really afraid what was happening to our food system, felt compelled to do something about it. But as a chef, I was living under kind of immense time poverty. Being a new dad, being a busy chef, I had no time. So the time piece was a huge thing for me in learning how to grow. And then second, I had slaughtered so many indoor plants along the journey. And so
have we all, my friend. We all have done it.
Well, I mean, I didn't have any colored thumb that was worth mentioning, let alone a green thumb. So yeah, I needed to look at ways of growing food, because I was compelled that people had to start growing, whatever that looked like. And through research came across this ancient low tech form of irrigation, the Oya, and I was just so intrigued. And yeah, that began the journey. Had a family friend who was a potter, kind of went to him for some advice, and had this strange image in my head of like, that moment in Ghost where they're like,
he's holding the other person. Yeah.
And so I just knew nothing about clay or irrigation, and it was cool. We fired some clay, and we got testing early, and this is like very, very cottage. Did a big sustainability festival in Vancouver. Had a local artist come up to me, and he was just so intrigued. He was like, "What is this? What are we doing?" And we talked about growing and how easy it was when you're watering once a week and you don't need to know the amounts, protecting kind of against overwatering as much as it is underwatering.
Yeah.
Kind of solving the water equation.
And if we go back real quick, for those who actually don't physically know what an Oya is, it's effectively a clay vessel, right, with sort of a rounded shape, or it doesn't necessarily have to be rounded, but oftentimes the top is thinner than the bottom. And the idea is it's just porous enough effectively to release water into the soil. The soil will then receive that water if it's dry enough and sort of create like a wicking effect chain reaction, so to speak, to get the water out to a certain radius, and that radius kind of depends on the size of the Oya itself. And so, like you were saying, it's got that passive irrigation component for those who, I like the idea of time poverty. I hadn't heard of it that way, but for those of you who are out there who are like, I don't want to be sitting out here watering for an hour and a half every day, which sounds like an exaggeration, but actually Jacques on our team, before he installed irrigation of any kind, he has drip and Oyas. He was spending probably an hour and a half every day because he has a pretty large garden. It's a real time commitment.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And you nailed the description. And so the idea is like just the neck is poking out, and really it's watering from below. It's subsurface irrigation. So even in desert, even in hot conditions, you're watering from below. So you don't have all that surface evaporation or runoff or water loss. And that's why it becomes just this so efficient and super easy to maintain regular watering for all those plants.
So when you sort of came up with, I wouldn't say came up with the idea, right? It's ancient technology.
Yeah.
But when you decided to offer it, was there like a specific sort of improvement that you made to it back then? Or was it just the fact that like it wasn't a popularized method, you want to repopularize it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we're talking like low tech solutions to localized plant irrigation, it's still the most efficient form. And so even with drip irrigation, that surface evaporation and runoff is majority of the water loss. So it's an inefficient system. We do see companies coming online now that are doing almost like subsurface drip, which is cool, like the root quenchers of the world. And I know Ratio's got some very forward thinking irrigation products as well. So there is this shift, I think. It also depends on like the size of the application. If you had a 30-acre cornfield, you're not going to use Oyas to irrigate that.
No, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
That'd be a lot of pods. But, solely for the purpose of what I was hoping to achieve, a couple of raised beds, you want to grow those few things that the fam likes to eat, but you don't have the time or the knowledge to do it. It was like watering for dummies, and I'm the dummy, right?
Yeah. And it's okay to be a smarty who wants to be a dummy too. Like if you want to just relax and not have to stress about your watering, even though you might theoretically know how to water well, that's also fine. I mean, like I mentioned, Jacques, he'll put Oyas in, we just launched these 65-gallon grow bags.
Nice.
And he really enjoys that size for potatoes and all sorts of like larger crops. And so he'll just put a big old Oya right in the middle, and he just never worries about it. And just top it up every so often.
Yeah.
Which is better than, I mean, you're not going to, you can definitely hook drip up to grow bags. We're actually going to do this like irrigation ring for them pretty soon.
Oh, cool.
But if you don't want to, then Oya is a really good option there. I would argue almost the best option, because you've got the spherical spread of the Oya, right? So it's going to spread out the water in that sort of spherical footprint. Well, grow bag is a circle, so that's perfect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of really nice for circular pots and planters, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%. And keeping in mind too, like planting and growing cycles, when people are using Oyas for the first time, we'll get comments, we'll get feedback, and they'll direct seed some stuff and stop surface watering. They're only watering within the vessel, and then they're wondering why their plants aren't germinating to the same degree. And so, you're reminding folks that there is time before those roots get established and can go to that water source underground and pull what they need. So surface watering is still necessary in germinating or having successful transplants. Very, very key. And that's where, any of the drip or anything that's going on top to help you do that is going to be hugely important.
Josh, I mean, you come from the world of cooking and being a chef, and you interface, I can imagine, with a lot of different aspects of the food system doing that and GrowOya. So I'm curious your take on how you see the food system. I understand you're also in Canada, so I don't know the difference between, the USA and Canada's food system as well as you might.
It's funny. I always talk about food like a web. It's definitely not linear, and there's so many different components. It's always been complex when it should be simple. I love that you talked about origin. I mean, humanity used to be like, that's all it was survival. How are you going to eat for the day? How are you going to eat for the next day? But talk about my kind of like connection to it. So being a chef, I I spent the high school years, learning to be a chef, got my chef certificate, young, moved to Europe, cooked all over, fancy restaurants, big hotels. And what I began to see was a real shift into big food, what I'd say consolidation. This went hand in hand with big ag, and I didn't like what I was seeing. Um, it became less and less about the diversity, and the regional procurement of food, and more the mass control. We began to see products traveling farther and farther, which meant bigger and bigger impacts on the environment, less and less for those small and diverse farmers, and less nutrient content in these ingredients. And so, yeah, witnessing that firsthand, it was great to be up at a university that was fighting against that. Big institution cooking like a university, a school, a government agency. Most of the time, it is controlled, big contracts. And University of British Columbia is privately run. It's its own food program. They're one of the largest food service employers in Western Canada. And their MO was to increase as much local as possible. And so I began this process of like, well, why local? What makes local better?
That kicked off sort of the deep dive.
It did. And I mean, I think through the 2000s, at least in the food and food industry realm, you started to have all these sexy long table dinners, these farm table dinners. Everybody wanted to, dine with chickens at their feet or under a willow tree and have these real fancy chef dinners. But there was always more to it than that, what these chefs were trying to say and what they were trying to do. And from a nutritional standpoint, fresh is best, right? Like we know that the nutrient
Absolutely.
density is there, but any chef will tell you too that fresh and peak ripeness, the flavor profile is there as well. So the two of those things combined, right, it makes it a no-brainer to be eating that way. The problem is majority of our food isn't that. It's not peak ripeness, and it's certainly not coming from local. Even us in like Western Canada here, California, Arizona, and Mexico, you feed us, right? It's scary how little local production we have for local plates and local mouths.
We were talking with I had a fellow Canadian, Tyler Heppel, on the show.
Oh yeah,
he goes by Potato Tie.
Potato Tie.
Potato Tie.
What a
we had him on, and he was saying basically the same thing. I mean, they grow enough potatoes on their family farm that without the production that they alone produce in their region, there is a food gap, or a hungry gap, I think it's called, just because nothing else is being grown up there, which is it's really surprising. And then I guess the other observation I was thinking about when you were sharing your chef story was, it seems like, and I can corroborate this a little bit with when I used to grow and sell microgreens to chefs. There was a time in which the chefs basically didn't seem to care where it came from if the flavor and the visual appeal was good. So flavor profile good, visuals good, price good, I'm buying it, right?
Uh-huh.
Now it does seem like they're saying I would prefer if it came from a more local source, but it is also a business, and the economics of that has to work. And so if we have such crazy economies of scale, and let's say growing lettuce in the Central Valley of California, then how am I even going to beat them out as a small Vancouver lettuce farm? It's hard to say. And maybe you have to sell the story like, look, like this is truly a better product. It's not comparable on price. I'm not trying to be the lowest bidder here on this contract. But yeah, it's very interesting. And it does seem like, a fresh tomato is simply better than anything you can buy in. It's not even close.
100%.
And it doesn't even have to be a good variety. It could be like a medium tier variety. And fresher, it's still much better than like a nice heirloom that's been carted from New York or something like that.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's interesting you brought up Ty too. There's a whole other element of what's happening to the farmer. And in Canada, the median age of a farmer is up there. We're losing farmland like there's no tomorrow. The cost of farming when it's small scale is so expensive. And I know it's a lot of the same trends in the United States. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to get local food in an industry where it's more and more important all the time to keep it alive. Fast forward to COVID, and COVID was a very interesting lesson in what it meant to, talking about these food systems and where your food's coming from. It wasn't just the toilet paper that people were stockpiling, or that food access was being compromised, like left, right, and center. And so once people were waking up to that kind of supply chain disruption, I think the awareness around food, like where it comes from, what is it, and this overall question about health, like we are what we eat, right? This, like, these elements were just so interesting in recent years, and I'm truly convinced that played a big role in a surge of new gardeners in the space too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I don't even think so. I know so because when the lockdowns happened, somewhere around early March of 2020, Epic was much smaller than it is now, but it was still decently sized. And I remember waking up and talking to my small team at the time and saying, like, it's go time, not in the sense of like I was excited about the crisis or anything like that, but the interest in gardening was surging because everyone was stuck at home, was looking for things to do. So like my baker friends, my carpenter friends, all these home hobby sort of creators that I keep company with were all experiencing the same thing. I think the interesting thing about gardening though is that it stayed a habit. It stayed a hobby. Someone who got into it had enough time to actually really devote to it. They weren't as time poor as perhaps you were in those early days, right? And there was nothing else to do. So they actually dove in deep and understood it on a more fundamental level. So it went from hobby to something that was actually part of their life. And in that way, if there was to be a silver lining about something like that, then that certainly would be one of them, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And what you were talking about, somebody getting a tomato in March from Maine or Vermont, or from, these different areas coming through. Once you've spent a couple of seasons growing your own food, and the flavor of that and the cost of it, like there's a huge cost component and that food access component to, hey, where are my organic vegetables coming from? And
Yeah.
and so for the gardener to be able to control that, that is like, you are poking big food sideways. You're not being dictated to what a bunch of carrots is worth, or
Yeah.
how expensive that romaine lettuce is for your Caesar. It's now, well, wait a minute, I can grow it. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to taste better, and it's going to be more nutrient dense. So
Maybe you're a little biased here, but that's okay. Maybe we could run through like watering techniques. There's a million and one ways to do it, but they all kind of collapse into a few different methods.
yeah, absolutely. Things to consider. Where are you growing? What does that look like? Are you irrigating a balcony? Very urban. You might not have a water tap. You might not have something to plug into out on the balcony. Same with a laneway or a rooftop garden. Maybe it's your community garden. Your water access or your water options could first be limited. I don't think everybody has the luxury of having all the options all the time. So definitely getting a great sense of what you're hoping to do and how you're hoping to do it is really helpful. I think when people are setting up gardens, irrigation's top of mind. How am I going to water this thing? Is this in ground? Is this a raised bed? What does this look like? And as we were talking last time, not every water option is the same. You can't irrigate 30 acres of corn with Oyas. It's not practical.
You certainly could, but it would be an engineering feat. I would definitely bow down to someone who attempted that.
Well, yeah, it'd be crazy. And Oyas in particular, we had spoke to it before. You got to make sure that you're still surface watering when you're doing those, germinating, direct sowing your seeds, transplanting, making sure that hand watering or wand or drip irrigation lines are still giving you that surface water, because at different times and different plants are going to require different watering options. So just really being clear what options are out there and when and how to use them.
Here's my perspective. You've got soaker hoses, right? You've got drip irrigation, you've got Oyas. We've already talked about that. You have sub-irrigated planters, which obviously require some sort of container. You've got hand watering, which I actually recommend for most beginners. I actually think hand watering is ideal because you have to learn how to water. So to me, if you're going to install a system like drip or Oya, etc., Oya probably more forgiving for sure, but you actually have to know like, okay, well, how much water does this particular bed need? How much water do these plants want? If it's an orchard, obviously that's quite different. And so I really like the hand water. I will say at this point in the garden's development here at the homestead, it's too much for me to hand water all the time, especially in summer. It'd be so much time, and so we did put in a zone-based irrigation system that helped out quite a bit.
Nice.
Um, but I do want to test out chained Oyas. I want to do like Oyas in a chain system and have like a gravity fed, I don't know, something like that, just because then I get the benefits of passivity with not even having to refill them too often.
Yep.
But yeah, where do you see Oyas particularly, like where do you see them being best applied?
Well, to kind of build on what you were saying about hand watering, you love it for a beginner gardener and somebody who's really starting out so you can learn to water. I think there's that same learning curve with Oyas. What I like about the hand watering is that, yeah, you're getting close to your plants. And when you're growing things for the first time, being connected, checking things out, not just watering levels, but maybe you're looking at pests. Maybe you're looking at, what's happening to the plant. What's the plant saying? It's an important connection to get in there. And I don't think you have that same connection if you just kind of automate and walk away. And so same with the Oyas. I mean, once you've got them in the ground, it's getting you central to your garden. If it's that big grow bag or small raised bed, you've got a 3x6 raised bed. You could put a couple of mediums in there. Well, as that plant or those plants are beginning to develop around the Oya, you want to kind of get in, take that lid off, take a look. How are we doing today? Like, is it 105 degrees outside? Is it, 18 hours of direct sun? Do I have shade cloth? Like, it's all those variables that you'll have to get accustomed to begin to really know what your plants need and to let them to thrive. So much like hand watering, I think Oyas are going to provide this opportunity for simple growing as long as you're kind of connected.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's so interesting because it depends on your personal proclivities. Like for me, I'm very curious. I want to learn why things happen and why they work. And that helps me sometimes for sure. Sometimes it definitely hurts me. I go down these weird rabbit holes and I like get very distracted. But if it depends on your motivation, right? I'm always trying to think like, how do I speak about the craft in a way that excites someone? And some people get into the nerdy stuff and some people don't, right? And so if someone's like, hey, look, Jacques, when I first met Jacques, he was like, I just grow for flavor. I just want things that taste good. And I don't really care too much about if it's a funny looking variety or if it looks, nice yellow stripes on the tomato, whatever. And so once you understand that about someone, then you go, okay, well, I can speak to you in a way that makes sense. And to me, it's the same with irrigation. It's like, sure, you can go all the way deep down the rabbit hole, or you can just hand water for a little bit, maybe throw some Oyas in the ground and move on from there. And there's nothing wrong with that either, provided you want a simple garden. And we actually just had a guest on, Rachel. She was on, and she was talking about kind of just having a lazy garden. Like nothing wrong with that. She's a naturalist. She's got a job. She's working. She's busy. She's traveling. She's like, I want a garden that I definitely will tend to for sure, but I'm not going to go, to your level, speaking about me, going absolutely wild with it and obsessing over how the hedge looks and this and that. And I'm like, cool. Well, then these are some plants you can try. You could try this irrigation. So to me, it's a really good way to water with just like way less effort.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, the whole idea of the biz, and the product, it came out of solving my problem. I was a busy dad and a very busy chef. I had no time and I didn't know what levels to water my plants. And so this solved both of those. Fast forward 10 years and now I don't water everything with Oyas. I grow a ton of soft neck garlic. It's a very drought tolerant type of garlic that I'm growing. It doesn't need watering. It really can just kick it. But I also grow what I love. And so potatoes are being Irish and all, I can't grow enough of them.
Gotta have them.
Uh,
You don't need to convince me to grow potatoes. I'm all about it.
they're my favorite. And eating a potato organically out of your soil versus the stuff that you get in the store, it's another one you just can't compare. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and for those guys to be watered with Oyas only, man, they're so happy and it's so low maintenance, you know?
Yeah, the potato one is actually a really good example of super passive, because potatoes themselves don't really need too much. And then you add a simple watering method and you got a powerful punch for an amazing amount of calories. I had a decent potato crop this year. It wasn't like killer like the year prior, but then I had rats come into the house and poop all
No.
over them. And so I had to sacrifice. It was very sad,
Oh,
very
that's
sad. But
awful.
yeah, it was a bummer. But this year I will be back in full force with both the potatoes and the onions. I'm actually really curious, Josh, like when you first started gardening, when was that in your life?
I first started gardening, hadn't grown anything prior to just after the Olympics, 2010, Vancouver hosted.
Mm.
Really, really busy time. Two small kids at the time, busy chef. Knew I wanted to grow, but had no idea what that meant. So there was a water equation. I didn't know the difference between soil or dirt. I really
That's a very common one. Everyone calls it dirt at the start.
seeds too. You know, I had never grown anything from seed. It always somehow was a plant first, and
Mm.
and just had no capacity to know what it was like. So I mean, I dove right in. I dove right in experimenting with Oyas. I dove right in direct seeding and buying transplants and just trying to understand. I felt so overwhelmed in the beginning as practical knowledge or insight to gardening wasn't maybe as accessible as what I thought it would have been. Um, so, I mean, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos of other people who were experimenting in the garden. Um, didn't really get a lot of books,
Hmm.
but did join a community garden, asked other gardeners a lot of questions, and spent a lot of time just trying to absorb, experiment, have it go sideways, and learn to do it over.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was mentoring under Mel Bartholomew. A lot of folks listening, especially if you're an older listener, you know that that's how I got my start. Is I'd actually know that I wanted to garden when I started working with him. I was actually working with him on a website, and he's the author of course, Square Foot Gardening, one of the classic books in the space. And then obviously got into gardening, and I was like, oh, I think I'm working with a baller. I had no idea. And so that was my start. And for me, it was helpful because, again, like I did not come from that background. So I was able to digest Mel's work and it made sense because it was written for someone exactly like myself. I had no clue. And then I started getting into more of the seminal texts, How to Grow More Vegetables by John Jevons, those sorts of books. Early YouTube was helpful for me as well. I think the thing I could have done, sounds like you did it, which I think was very smart, and I did not as much. I was in a community garden very early on. The vibe there did not really fit for me. I don't know what it was. It was sort of like a little fiefdom by the person who owned the space or managed it, and they just made it not very pleasant to be around the
Oh,
garden, which it was just wasn't great. And so the community aspect of it wasn't strong. So, but I think the point you made is totally valid. If there was someone around that had 50 years on me in the garden, and there are many of those people, why would you not just ask them what to do, right? Because they've got so much experience, they can just shortcut you about a decade or more if you just sort of paid attention.
yeah, 100%. The only drawbacks to the community gardens is I don't know about Southern California, but lengthy wait lists to get in, and
Yeah.
you can never
Yeah.
have enough space. So getting in, you're kind of limited by time and limited by space. But just like that saying, you bloom where you're planted. So you make
Yeah.
the best out of what you've got. But yeah, seed swapping, and knowledge swapping was kind of at the roots. Pardon the pun. It was awesome. I had such a good experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest mistake I made in my early days was I was, kind of on my own, holed up, reading on the computer, researching, watching videos, testing things in a condo. And, I'm more of an introverted guy for sure. And so that fits my nature, but it would have been nice if I guess I didn't really realize how much I loved it until later on in my life, though. Like maybe 4 or 5 years in, I was like, oh, wow, I don't think I'm stopping this. Because, you have hobbies in life and they go away. Like I rock climb for 3 or 4 years. I don't rock climb right now. I would like to get back to it, but gardening, I've never stopped. So once I realized that, then I really plugged into it. And then I really sped up my learning. Like even starting this podcast was a way for me to connect with people around the world who know like everything about bats or everything about, frogs, whatever, some random particular topic that they've devoted their lives to. And now I can soak up all that wisdom and of course share it with everyone listening right now. And to me, I would say that's the best way to get bestest. I don't think I've made that flub in a while. The bestest way, I'm going to roll with it. It's the bestest way to get better faster is just listening to the elders in the space and going, they've been doing it for 2 decades. It's probably correct, especially if they live in my area. And maybe I'll just annoy them for a while. And if there's one thing you won't be able to annoy a gardener about, it's to talk about gardening. Like we don't seem to get sick of it. And so it's not one of those hobbies where you'll like bug someone too much. I don't think. No, I could be wrong. Sorry to all those gardeners out there who are probably going to get hit up now for advice, but that's my perspective on how to get good faster.
Yeah, I love it. And there's some real strength and value in just growing slow. Just grow slow. Do what you can. It's not a race. You think about trees. Trees grow slow, but the mighty tree, deep roots, right?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true as well. You can overexpand your garden early on, get burnt out, quit. Or you can kind of, hey, I'm going to conquer a bed, my favorite crops. I'm going to add 2 beds next year. We actually see that a lot with the segment of our listeners who end up shopping with us, like Birdie's Beds customers, those of you who have bought our seed trays and our seeds at Botanical Interests now. A lot of folks tend to tiptoe in with a bed, and then next year you see 2 beds come through the order, and then you see more seeds come through, whereas the first season it was less seeds, right? And you can tell just by looking at what someone has ordered with us, they're getting a little deeper, which we of course love to see because that means that they're really having success with the craft. And that's what we're here for, right? And I'm sure that's what you guys are there for too with GrowOya. Your story seems to be one of necessity, right? You wanted to find a way to grow something because you wanted to grow fresh produce as a chef, but didn't have the time. And there goes the Oyas. So actually, I'm curious what your garden looks like today. Like, how does the Josh McWilliams home garden actually look, and how do the Oyas set up? Like, give us a little rundown.
Yeah, so I've been a member of a community garden since about 2014. I love the community aspect. I love the space to grow. And since then, it's kind of been Oya's testing grounds. I've been an absolute pirate on a balcony, trying to grow in every container that there is, every configuration, as well as laneways and driveway gardens. So growing in small spaces, or when you don't have space, I've really leaned into, and I think that's a big barrier for a lot of people. I don't have room to grow. I can't grow because I don't have a farm. Well, I don't have a farm either. And most of the last decade has been growing in spaces that weren't ideal. And it's amazing and inspiring once you begin that you can really grow a lot of food in a relatively small amount of space. So just encouragement for all the listeners, like just grow where you have, grow what you can grow. These days in that community garden, it is a lot of testing. It's a lot of putting in Oyas, seeing how they do. We've overwintered a bunch, seeing kind of what that threshold is like over winter, how they do with different crops. It's been hard for me because like I said, I just want to grow garlic and potatoes everywhere I can, but I'm like, well,
no argument from me on that.
Yeah. So just testing, it's exciting. We got some new products coming out in 2024. So we've been working on those, what those look like in the garden. Yeah, that's really what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me right now, it's as we speak, it's fall makeover time, and so
nice.
We're gonna be stringing up a lot of the peppers in just a little bit here. I harvested all the end of the late summer peppers. Actually doing it legit mode this time, where I have a needle and some some like thick thread and
Wow.
like stabbing through the caps and like creating that little tie, which I'm personally very excited about because I've always seen those and I've always admired the look and the aesthetic of it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm coming around. I think those who've listened to the podcast for a while know that I was so pragmatic in my earlier years,
Yeah.
and now I'm coming around to the beauty of the garden and wanting it to always be a space that I feel like it's not a chore to be out there,
Mm.
even as it gets torn down right now, there's a level of beauty that's still there. You know what I mean? Like rebuilding a bed. I was telling Jacques the other day, I was like, I don't know if there's anything as satisfying to me as resetting a garden bed,
Yeah.
right? Like it's therapeutic. You clear out the old, you reset, you re-amend, you remulch, you smooth the soil. I really love smoothing soil. I feel like I could be one of those monks that like takes the rake through the sand, and just kind of
I
chills.
love that.
But it's really nice. I mean, and then thinking about this season at least, getting into a lot of the perennials and saying like, hey, am I ever gonna be putting like annual veg in that particular area? No, I should think about a tree, shrub, bush, some sort of perennial flower bush, something like that, that can stay there so that the beauty of that particular viewpoint in the garden is always preserved. So to me, that's what I'm getting really excited about, and it's a change for sure because I used to not be that way at all.
I love that you brought up the Zen raking. I
Yeah,
was working on a farm up here throughout last year, and it's cool, diverse kind of 5 acre farm. They had some greenhouse, they had some big output stuff attached to a really great local brewery out here. And I remember, being in these raised beds, essentially these rows, and down on my hands and knees and using like a little Japanese weeder tool and just weeding in between the beds. And I was thinking like, God, this is so peaceful.
yeah, I know,
Watching
I know.
eagles soar and like do a little bit of weeding. It was like you lost touch with reality and got so much out of it.
I would say you didn't lose touch with reality though. You lost touch with unreality,
Love
right?
it. I love it.
Um, it was funny because I'm always searching for that because my mind is always so active and it's difficult to like get out of the mental loop sometimes. And so walks for me obviously very helpful. But I was talking with Jacques just a little bit ago. He's telling me he went to a whittling class,
Cool.
and he I guess you have to do the level one. You like can't skip the levels of whittling. They're very strict, and you have to whittle a spoon. And so he's like, yeah, I spent the whole like afternoon Sunday whittling a spoon for like 4 hours. He's like, I didn't have a single thought for 4 hours. It's like the first time that's happened in years. And I was like, dude, get sign up for level two. Like this is good.
Sounds
This is good
amazing.
news, And so to me, like the creativity of the garden, I know that's what we're talking about here is unlocked in a sense by being able to actually unplug like that. Because otherwise, you're just thinking all the time.
Uh,
And so, like, maybe you need to get out there and do some weeding. And I personally like to do it after the rain comes. So if it's raining or even if it's misting, I'll throw a windbreaker on. I'll go out there and just start picking.
Nice.
And then I just feel better after.
Yeah, I love it. I love
So
you talking about making it your own too. The sewing up peppers. I was picturing, the times I spent in southern Italy and Calabria and in these restaurants, all the tied up chilies there, like very cool. I mean, gardens always the gateway is always been food, right? Like this is
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why we cultivate the space, right? Otherwise, you just let it go wild and enjoy that. But we do want something out of it as edible gardeners. So,
100%.
dude, it's been cool having you on. Like I said, we've known each other for a while. It's been cool to see the rise of GrowOya. I'd love to give you guys a chance to kind of shout out what you guys are up to. Maybe a little teaser of the new products. I don't know if you're ready to disclose, but if you are, for the listeners of the pod.
Yeah, not there yet. It's gonna come soon, but yeah, gonna be back down in San Diego soon, and love to come see the homestead. It's been awesome to see. I can't wait till the day that I get a little bit of land and can transform
Yeah,
it and do the same thing.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Josh. Appreciate it.
You got it. We'll talk soon.